Greetings to all our today's special guest, Ian Black, pilot who flew tours on the Phantom, Lightning and Tornado. He was the last RAF pilot to qualify to fly the Lightning, flying with number 11 Squadron, and also spent 4 years with the French Air Force flying the Mirage 2000. He flew operations in the Gulf and Bosnia. Mr. Black, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Good to see you all.
Mr. Black, after mastering the Lightning and Tornado, the RAFs you volunteered to fly France's hottest fighter, the superb Mirage 2000, how did you end up flying Mirage 2000? And even after flying the mighty Lightning, the Mirage 2000 remains your favorite airplane. Why?
Lots of questions. First of all, I apologize. I got a cold and a cough, so excuse my croaky voice, but it probably makes me sound more like a fighter pilot. I had a choice, really, when I was in the RAF. I'd reached a point in my career where I'd flown the Phantom, I'd flown the Lightning, the Tornado was about to come into service, and you had the chance to go and fly an exchange tour with another Air Force. So at that point in the 1980s, 90s, you know, the world was your oyster. You could fly the F-15, the F-16, the F-117, you could fly the F-104, you could fly the Mirage 3, you could fly the Mirage 2000. Pretty much any aircraft, Western aircraft, was available to RAF pilots. In exchange, the RAF got F-14 pilots, F-14 backseaters, and we just spent 3 years flying their aircraft. So to me, it was more about the lifestyle of where I was going to live. So I kind of picked, did I want to live in Norway? I love Norway. I love Norwegian people, but I didn't want to spend 3 years there, somewhere in the Arctic Circle. Did I want to go to America? Sure, you know, living in America is great, but the US Air Force tend to have a work ethic where they go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and they come back at 8 o'clock at night. So they work pretty hard. So I wanted to find a balance where there was something that would benefit me. So going abroad and learning a foreign language was a good one. The Mirage 2000 at the time was a pretty new airplane. So it was a bit unknown. It wasn't an F-16. So the Mirage 2000 had a lot of appeal to me. Plus, living in the south of France for 3 or 4 years was also great.
Did you fly the similar air combat training flights on the Mirage 2000? If so, against which types, and what did you learn from each type? What was the most challenging fighter you faced while flying the Mirage 2000?
Well, first off, the main thing about the Mirage 2000 is it's a unique airplane. It does combat like no other aircraft does. So you have to understand how to fight the Mirage 2000, first of all. And it was quite a humbling experience because French pilots are very good. They're very good at air combat, and they know their aircraft very well, but they know how to fight that particular aircraft. So the Mirage 2000 is a Delta airplane, and a very powerful Delta airplane, but it also, because of the Delta wing, it will produce a huge amount of drag. So you can do an instantaneous 9G turn and start off at 450 knots, but by the time you've done that 9G turn, what they call a back turn, you're back at 250 knots. So you've got to be really conscious about how you use your energy. In an F-16, you can pull 9G, and then the wing will allow you to maintain 350 knots or so, and you can get that energy back again. In the Mirage 2000, because of that huge wing, if you do that one back turn, you can end up very low speed, and therefore you've got to know, are you in a position to regain that energy again? So you have to understand on a Mirage 2000 how to fight the airplane, specifically that airplane, not an F-16, not an F-18, not an F-15. In terms of dissimilar air combat, because we were based in the south of France, we had lots of people around us. So we had F-16s, we had F-18s, we had F-8 Crusaders, we had Tornado F-3s from the UK that would come across, we had Harriers that we'd do combat against, F-15s, F-14s, pretty much every fighter we fought against. And at my time, we didn't fight against the MiG-29 or the Su-27, but latterly they did.
About Bosnia missions, in early January 1994, the squadron was tasked with deploying to Bosnia in 12 weeks, and you were part of the deployment. There was a lot of learn air-to-air, air-to-ground, and day and night air-to-air refueling. But what was your most notable and most dangerous flight on the Mirage 2000 during Bosnia missions?
Well, probably the most dangerous, and this will probably, if Ukraine gets the Mirage 2000 apply to Ukrainian pilots, is I was a Tornado F3 pilot. I was an air defense pilot, and I stopped flying the F3 in around about March time. I went to fly the Mirage 2000 at Dijon at the conversion unit, and within 12 weeks, I was then doing live missions in Bosnia. So that was a huge, very steep learning curve, because the last time I done air to ground was probably about 5 or 6 years before. French pilots tend to have a different philosophy to RAF pilots. RAF pilots at that stage would either do air defense or air to ground, and you stick in that role. You didn't cross over very seldomly. So doing air to ground missions was extremely difficult for me. I found it very hard work, because when you're an air defense pilot and you're a proper fighter pilot, all you have to worry about is your weapons and the airspace you're in. All of a sudden, when you're flying air to ground, you've got to worry about the air to ground threats. You've got to worry about where you are, going into danger areas, et cetera, and also making sure that if you're dropping weapons, that you're dropping weapons on the right target. So that was extremely difficult. The French Air Force have a great philosophy where most of their pilots will cross between, at that stage, flying the Mirage 2000, the 2000D or 2000N or the Jaguar. So they were very able to do multitasking, and they adopted the Mirage 2000C into what was then known as a swing roll airplane. So it could carry bombs, or it could carry missiles, it could carry big fuel tanks, and it could adapt to every mission at that stage as well. It was the infancy of GPS, and you still carried maps and a stopwatch, and you still had to do your navigation visually. So it was a very high workload.
In general, as I understand, you flew nearly 800 hours on the Mirage 2000, of which 300 hours were on live combat missions, right?
Correct.
And France will transfer Mirage 2000 to 5 combat aircraft to Ukraine and launch a training program for Ukrainian pilots to learn how to fly fighter jets, said the country's President Emmanuel Macron. The French aircraft would potentially be the second Western fighter aircraft to be flown by Ukrainian armed forces, joining us-made F-16s. And of course, your first reaction when you heard this news, and how these fighters aircraft will help the Ukrainian armed forces. What missions will the Mirage fly?
Well, obviously, I'm delighted that the French have decided to give the Ukrainian Air Force Mirage 2000. It's a fantastic aircraft, even today. I'm sure that no Ukrainian pilots will be watching me or taking my advice, but if I can give them any confidence, I flew the Mirage 2000 with 2,000 hours of air defense time in other aircraft. I didn't speak very good French, and I managed to cope okay. The airplane is a very simple airplane to fly once you know how it works. It's very adaptable. And I think it'll be a really good aircraft for the Ukrainian Air Force. It never breaks down, or breaks down very seldomly. It can pull 9G all day, and you can put whatever weapons you want underneath it, and it'll fly for a long time. So I'm actually really pleased that the French have given the Mirage 2000 Ukrainian Air Force.
At the same time, Macron noted that Kyiv will receive the right to use Mirage 2000 to fire for attacks on targets in Russia. And we don't give permission to use weapons to attack civilians, but to neutralize the point from which you were attacked, yes, Macron said. Which military targets could be under attack on Russian territory? How do you think?
I guess it depends on whether the Ukrainian Air Force want to use the Mirage 2000 in the air defense role, the air-to-ground role, or what's known as the swing role, where they use some air-to-ground, some air-to-air. I think it'd be a really good aircraft in the close air support role. So it would be good with the gun against soft-armed ground targets. I think whatever it goes up against, it'll do well.
If we're talking about attack on Russian territory, I want to say that as a result of the attack on the Aktubinsk airfield in the Astrakhan region of Russia on June 8, Russian Su-57 fighters were hit. This was stated by the representative of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Andriy Yusov, on the air of the Teleton. How the loss of these aircraft will affect Russian aviation? What is known about Russian Su-57 aircraft?
Well, I mean, for every fighter pilot, I guess that the one thing they want to do is have a 1 versus 1 engagement with the Su-57. That's real Top Gun material. So I guess if you're flying the Mirage 2000, that's your ultimate goal, is to come up against the latest Russian fighter. how it would fare. I think it'll do pretty well, and I think God willing, it should be able to beat it easily.
And let's continue to talk about the Mirage and about weapons. Ukraine had previously received the long-range Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles from France and also the UK. Not only these missiles, part of the Mirage 2000's regularly complement of weaponry, which will permit deployment of these missiles across a broader range of missions. As I understand, the aircraft can also carry the Hammer, and what else?
The good thing about the Mirage 2000 is when you look at the underneath of the fuselage, it's completely flat and clean. So generally in the Western world, when you put a new missile like Scalp onto a Tornado or something, you would need to spend 6 to 9 months doing tests and dropping and trials to make sure it falls the correct way and doesn't hit things. The Mirage 2000, I'm pretty sure you can put whatever you want on it. So I think whatever weapons are given to Mirage 2000 from whatever country, you probably, as long as the connectors are good, the compatibility will be fine.
Expert on aviation market development Bogdan Dolins emphasized increasing the number of Mirages will allow us to increase the number of launchers to use Storm Shadow missiles. As a rule, from the enemy's information, the number of missiles of this type that were launched simultaneously didn't exceed 12 to 20. That is, the appearance of Mirage in a large number will allow us to move to a one-time launch of up to 45 to 50 missiles, and this is complicated their interception, isn't it?
It is, and I guess the thing will be is that they don't make Mirage 2000s anymore, so there'll only be a limited number they can give to the Ukrainian Air Force. Whether they give them the Mirage 2000Ns, which I think probably are in storage, or some of the old 2000Ds, remains to be seen. If they can, and keep on giving Ukraine Mirage 2000s, whatever mark, that'll be good.
And following the recent announcement by French President Emmanuel Macron regarding to intention to transfer multipurpose Mirage 2005 aircraft to Ukraine, the press has suggested that Paris might send Kyiv no more than half of such fighters currently in service with the French Air Force, citing La Tribuna. How many aircraft can be available? How do you think? Which number of Mirage 2005 would be sufficiently for Ukraine to enhance its air defense capabilities?
Well, that's a very hard question because I'm not sure how many Mirage 2000-5s are left now. They've been in service a long time. I would say a minimum of 12 aircraft or 15, but then there's other air forces like Qatar and UAE that have got rid of their Mirage 2000-5s, which are very, very capable aircraft. If there's some way that they can, actually acquire these aircraft, then that'll be a real boost for Ukraine as well.
And Macron has proposed that Ukraine pilots could begin training by the end of the summer. Typically, pilot training for the Mirage takes around 6 months approximately, right? Or maybe more.
I don't think it would take that long, really. I think there's two sides of the training. You've got to learn to fly the airplane, and then you've got to learn to understand that how the West fly their aircraft, and that's a different philosophy. Western pilots have a lot of autonomy. They have a lot of freedom to do what they want in the air, working with AWACS and GCI. Unlike Russian pilots, they're not constrained in what they can do. They can go off and do whatever they want to do, what they feel fit at the time. So it's a 50-50. Learn to fly the airplane and learn to fight the airplane like the Western forces do.
And should Ukrainian government hire private pilots with the war continuing into its third year? For example, Dan Hampton, a retired lieutenant colonel known as the US Air Force's deadliest F-16 pilot, told Voice of America he was ready to fly planes for Ukraine's military himself if necessary.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I think every fighter pilot would love to go back and fly in a fighter airplane, but I'm too old to do that. You need to find some 25 or 35-year-old guys who can go and do it. I don't think it would be a good idea to have mercenary pilots who've flown the F-16 before, who are Dutch or Belgian or American, only because I think it would escalate the conflict. If, for example, one was shot down inside Russia, if you imagine the scenario of a Belgian or a Dutch or Norwegian F-16 pilot being captured by the Russians, that would just escalate the matters. And I don't see any reason at all why, Ukraine has got a fantastic reputation for having good fighter pilots. I don't see any reason why the pilot should be Ukrainian.
We were talking about F-16s, and there are 9 nations within NATO that have recently or still do operate the F-16, meaning there is a steady supply of both instructor pilots and specialists needed to train ground crew and maintenance personnel. But the NATO countries which have servicemen or contractors who could prepare pilots and mechanics to support the Mirage 2000 are limited to Greece and France itself. Will be supporting the Mirage is far more challenging. How do you think?
I don't think so, because the Mirage to me is a bit like the Gripen. It's a very simple aeroplane in terms of maintenance. It doesn't require hours and hours of maintenance. You can remove the engine in a couple of hours and put a new engine back in. And I guess in terms of mercenary engineers, as long as they operate from Ukraine, you could easily have Greek or French or whoever operating in Ukraine. I think the difficulty, as you alluded to, is that if you suddenly start having mercenary pilots flying the aircraft, that's where the problems would start.
Basin becomes another issue in that an aerodrome used for operations of Ukrainians' Russian-made MiG-29 or Su-27 will have to be significantly reconfigured in order to become an F-16 or Mirage 2000 base. Is it true that operate more than one type of fighter tend to have them segregated at separate facilities?
Yeah, 100%. You know, there's, apart from I would imagine operating the fuel system or putting a Sidewinder missile on an airplane, there's nothing common with an F-16 and Mirage 2000. So you're better off having them at specific bases, because NATO, throughout its life history, has always wanted to try and have a common fighter, so that, for example, years and years ago when I flew in NATO, we would train where we would take off from base A and we would go and land at base B, and at base B we could put all the weapons on and have the fuel and the hydraulics and everything worked on. But it never really worked, because everyone had different types of aircraft. So I think you would need to have a specific Mirage 2000 base and a specific F-16 base.
And about F-16 fighters, which Denmark transfers to the Ukrainian Air Forces, will arrive in the near future. This was announced by President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. How would you compare Mirage 2000 to an F-16?
Again, a great question. At the end of the day, it depends who the pilot is, who sits in the cockpit, because you can have the best airplane in the world, but you have the worst pilot in it, and it's still not going to be the best airplane in the world. The F-16 is a super capable airplane. I think the Mirage 2000 is evenly matched. If you have a Mirage 2000 and you have a pilot who knows how to fly the Mirage 2000, I'd rather go in a Mirage 2000 every day.
Ian, you're also an amazing innovation photographer. Photography plays a major role in your life, with your work appearing on the front pages of The Time, The Sun, and Daily Mirror newspapers, as well as cover shots on the Sydney Morning Herald. Recent commissions have included work for Breitling watches and the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Can you tell us about your career as a photographer? So, please.
That's pretty boring compared to flying in a fighter jet. But I've always had a passion for photography and aviation. And I guess if you're a pilot or you're a fighter pilot, you get put into positions where nobody else can be. So I wanted to capture what it was like from the cockpit, so that other people who didn't fly could see what it was like being in a jet fighter.
Mr. Black, thank you for supporting Ukraine, and thank you for your thoughts. Ian Black was with us. Guys, subscribe on your YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel, like this video, and see you, Mr. Black. Thank you. And I need to tell that Ian Black, pilot who flew tours on the Phantom, Lightning and Tornado, he was the last RAF pilot to qualify to fly the Lightning, flying with number 11 squadron, and also spent 4 years with the French Air Force flying the Mirage 2000. He flew operation in the Gulf and Bosnia. Thank you again, and see you.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.